Why do I not feel like to work? This is an increasingly popular question for people below 30. A huge pain point for our generation, including me, of course, but you can see this in your own life too. Whoever you talk to, whatever you go to, whatever social media you use, you can see that this is the most prominent question for our generation. But why? One might ask. Why is that? Why is there such a big and troublesome problem that no one seems to be able to solve? Because we are a spoiled generation. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by being spoiled? I mean that we are overprivileged in regards to our parents and their parents and their parents. They didn't have the high pleasure activities that we have nowadays. Yeah, they had alcohol. They might have, some of them, weed. But they didn't have, most people, TVs, video games, social media, internet, porn. They didn't have those. And that means that there is a difference of pleasure in generations. And our generation is kind of screwed on that regard because the motivation to do things is predicated on one thing. Can you guess what it is? That's dopamine. I know you hear dopamine everywhere. You heard about it, you know about it, but let me talk you just about it. Dopamine is the pleasure hormone, as most people know, but it also controls our motivation towards activities. If the perceived pleasure is low from that activity, and you also have a high perceived pleasure, let's say dopamine, on another activity, your brain wants to do high pleasure one. Think about it. Your brain sees two options. One is a high dopamine, and one is low. Your brain always rushes through that. That's why when you're working, after just 1 minute, you start to see that you have been starting to scroll. And after 40 minutes, you just realize that you have screwed the work session. That is the reason that you feel unmotivated for work, or reading a book, or even watching a long video. You can't seem to do that in your life right now. So you know the mechanics of dopamine right now. That's why your brain hates boredom, because boredom doesn't have any dopamine. When you stop in silence and just look at the wall, your brain wants to die because it is a literal hell for your brain. Your brain wants literal pain, someone to cut your arm, more than being bored. Think about that. This is something you should be really understanding. Your brain wants pain more than boredom. Because even pain has some levels of dopamine to it. But boredom doesn't have any pleasure, any dopamine. That's why sitting in silence and not scrolling is something that you cannot seem to do. That's why you cannot go to the bathroom like an idiot without your phone. You are scrolling on the can. Why? Because of this, because you cannot stand to boredom. I'm unfortunately a victim of that too. I am stupid too. Unfortunately. Lately, for following all the updates on the politics, on Epstein files, on Israel war, I downloaded the X app, the Twitter. And I hate to admit that I am using that on the can. And I deleted the app. I don't bring my phone to the can anymore like an idiot. And I'm trying to kind of Get rid of that addiction, because it is an addiction. You cannot stay silent. That's why you are starting to find the easiest dopamine option. And scrolling is very easy. You have to lower your dopamine levels. But how, you may ask? And that might be something that you have heard of too, dopamine detox. I know, everyone talks about it nowadays, and maybe for last couple of years, and you may have heard as monk mode or winter arc or locking in, anything. Those require you to do dopamine detox. Dopamine detox is basically abstaining yourself from high dopamine activities and trying to choose the low dopamine ones. Even if you are bored as hell, you are struggling to not do a scroll moment, you're not doing anything. You're just going to read books and work and go outside for a walk. That's it. Those activities and similar ones. No more social media, no more games, no more porn, no more weed, no more alcohol, no more going out to and playing, doing some shit with friends, etc. No more high dopamine activities. This way, you cure your brain. Your brain's low dopamine levels, the standards, are getting lower and lower each day. That's why when you have successfully gone through a dopamine detox and you remove those high dopamine activities in your life, your standards are so low that when you read book, you feel immense pleasure in regards to before. This is the way to get rid of this problem. I know it sounds boring, but it isn't. When you do that, when you abstain from those high dopamine activities, you realize that there is so much joy to life. Right now, you cannot feel the joy of looking a sea, the ocean, and sitting in the beach for a prolonged period of time, reading a book and dreaming about the scenery, or watching a movie and really understanding what the director and the writer wanted to give to you as a feeling. You cannot do those without dopamine detox, with modern addictions to social media, internet, games, etc. I have not achieved this yet in my life, but I am in the process of it, and I am feeling much more joy each day is passing. And to be honest, my high dopamine activities were much better than most people. My example won't be enough. So let's talk about Alex Hormozy. You may have heard him before. He's a successful and phenomenal entrepreneur, and he's very famous in the space right now. When he wants to get to work, he puts himself in a room that only has a desk, a chair, and a laptop. Not even windows. Not even a window to have a light from. That's it. And he says it helps him immensely. He says when you have nothing to do, the work is the most enjoyable thing you can do. That is awesome. And you can see it with Carl Jung, famous psychiatrist, maybe psychologist. I am not sure. And you can learn from him and his deep work sessions from the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. Anyway, these examples are the extreme ones that make it possible. You are a human and they are too. That's why you can do it. That's why even if you don't go that far, you still can do some dopamine detox. And you should be, because being able to sit in boredom, being able to get comfortable with boredom is a superpower. In a distracted world, being able to focus for a prolonged period of time, being able to be focused for more than other people is a superpower. Most people cannot stand focused more than 2 minutes. If you can do that, you're gonna be freaking Superman. I hope you get it.